Hi, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful BIM Coordinators Summit 2022. I'm here to talk to you about a recent RICS research report, the findings of that entitled State of Data Sharing and Collaboration in the Age of BIM and Digital Twins. My name is Anil Sawhney. I work for the RICS as the Global Construction Sector Lead. I'm based in the US. What I would like to share with you is really the findings of the Digitalization in Construction Report 2022. I have a QR code. If you can scan that, you are able to download freely this research report. Out of this research report, what I'd like to cover today is a very simplified view of the vision for our sector, the context of this study and this presentation, and finally, some highlights of our findings from the research. So let's look at a very simplified view of the vision. This is my interpretation. Broadly, all of us we know are involved in the delivery of projects which get transformed into assets. Recently, we have clearly understood within our sector that it's very important to develop some sort of a digital representation, virtual representation of our projects. Obviously, currently it's BIM. So the vision is simple: BIM it, then twin it, build it, operate it, and other downstream processes, which are today being discussed in the context of higher order outcomes, environmental outcomes, social outcomes, economic outcomes. We have been discussing recently digital twins to promote decarbonization and circularity in our sector. We have talked about use of digital twins to create assets, work on projects and create assets that provide the right social outcomes and also obviously economic outcomes such as value for money. These broad outcomes rely on us as a sector being able to share data and collaborate in our information management processes. So what's the context and why is this important as a research topic, as a discussion in today as well? If you look back in 2015 in the US, a study was done by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, very dated, but perhaps a very good catalyst to start discussion on the role of data interoperability and information management. At that time, an estimate of $15.8 billion annual cost burden of lack of interoperability or inadequate interoperability within our software systems and other digital tools. I'm not sure if there is a further study then now estimates how much have we saved out of that waste of $15.8 billion, and that's just in the US, and that only accounts for commercial and institutional buildings and industrial facilities. So the point being the data and collaboration still remain important. More recently, a study done by AGC here in the US. How much data are we really talking about? This is sort of 2019 data, loads and loads of data being created on a large infra project, perhaps 130 million emails, 55 million documents, 12 million workflows, but a very big chunk, about 95.5% of that data that's captured is going unused. 13% of construction teams' working hours are spent in searching for project data and information. 30% of the companies that were studied by AGCs tell that their applications do not integrate with one another. So that's where we are at, perhaps still as a mainstream. I know there are exemplar projects where much of this has already been shattered. We have overcome these issues and data sharing and collaboration is very high. But as a mainstream, that's probably not the case. More recently, we have reflected on, and this is a paper recently published by the UK BIM framework, and it's basically reflecting on our BIM journey perhaps as an afterthought, we should have focused on information management rather than building information modeling or BIM, because as we talk about BIM, certainly our interpretation is perhaps a 3D model, and we only think about design, collaboration, and visualization. But BIM is perhaps much more, but downstream, many of the cost consultants and other downstream participants in projects and assets perhaps do not do much with BIM even today. And that was the motivation for us to begin studying the role of digital tools in the construction sector at a very broad level. But before we go forward, we have to accept some brutal facts. While we search for single source of truths, maybe a collaborative or connected CDE, but we still must accept that we'll always have projects and assets in the foreseeable future with multiple disciplines and trades. We'll have multiple authoring tools. We'll have multiple formats and structures. And we'll always have multiple changes in our projects, and information is going to keep on evolving. And we'll sit all of this on top of legacy systems and data. So given this, how can we move forward? How can we study and find out the current state of data sharing and collaboration in our sector? We recently completed a study, which is now published as a RICS research report, freely available from our website, essentially highlighting the role of digitalization in construction in a very global sense. So we framed 4 simple questions. Question 1 related to the consistent use of digital tools or digitalization. Question 2 focused on improvement, which either is happening right now or perceived improvement due to digitalization. Question 3, probably a standard question in these kinds of studies, blockers to digitalization. And question 4, more importantly, focused on data sharing and information using digital tools, digital models. We got over 2,500 responses for this study and a global spread, predominantly from the UK, but a good representation from other regions as well. So let me walk through some of the findings, important findings from this survey, which are also detailed out in the research report. When we talked about the organization's consistent use of digital tools for various functions, we identified 6 key functions that project teams perform, beginning with cost estimation, prediction, planning and control, to carbon footprint calculations, benchmarking, reporting, incorporating ESG principles, designing and measuring social value, implementing whole of life, whole of asset thinking, and enhancing the progress monitoring, health, safety, and well-being on our projects. And the respondents were asked, in order to understand the consistent use, whether they're using on all projects, most projects, half of our projects, less than half, and none of the projects. You will notice there is a clear response indication here, which is that the consistent use is higher in functions such as cost estimation, enhancing progress monitoring, health, safety, and well-being, some mature projects. And it's quite low or in functions such as carbon footprint calculations. Only 7% of the respondents are using digital tools on all their projects. Compare that with also whole life thinking and whole of asset thinking or designing and measuring social value. Only about 8% of respondents globally felt that they're using or responded that they're using digital tools on all of their projects. Moving along to the perceived benefits of using digital tools on various processes and practices which their organizations are involved in. You will notice again that for functions such as cost estimation, prediction, planning and control, and enhancing progress monitoring, health, safety, and well-being, respondents are basically strongly agreeing to the large extent, close to, I would say, 75% and above, agreeing that there is significant improvement and benefit of using digital tools in those functions. There is also significant perception that digital tools can help functions such as carbon footprint calculation, ESG principles, and social value as well. So there is clear indication through these responses that digital tools benefit most of these functions. We had a similar kind of response globally. If you were to take a cross-section of the various regions that responded, there's a consistency in the responses as well. Here, we gather and illustrate the responses that are strongly agree and agree only amongst the respondents. And you will see that respondents felt cost estimation, prediction, planning, and control as the topmost function in which digital tools will lead to maximum benefits, about 68% respondents. Compare that to about 59%. And as we go down, there is actually not a significant drop, but you can clearly see decline in benefits or improvements led through digitalization on functions such as carbon footprint calculations, benchmarking reporting, with the lowest one reported as designing and measuring social value. Interestingly, if you combine the first two questions and look at the consistent use in some sort of a combination with the perceived improvements resulting from digitalization, you will notice a good trend here. In mature functions such as cost estimation, prediction, planning, and control, the folks who are using on most and all their projects and none of their projects is pretty closely aligned. About 35% responded that they're using on most of their projects and all of their projects. About 34% responded saying they do not use any digital tools for cost estimation, prediction, planning, and control. But there is a 68% response rate in terms of improvements that can be gained through the use of digital tools for cost estimation. Now compare that with carbon footprint. Obviously, there is a significant room for improvement or significant room for adoption. 21% of the respondents are currently using on most or all their projects digital tools for carbon footprint calculations. Compare that to a very high number of 46% not using digital tools for carbon footprint calculation. But yet 54% of the respondents suggest that they can see benefits from use of digitalization for carbon calculation or decarbonization efforts. Compare that to the last function on this illustration or chart, which is the enhancing progress monitoring, health, safety, and well-being. Again, folks not using versus using is very closely aligned, but the perceived benefits and the current benefits are quite high, 59% compared to the cost estimation, prediction, planning, and control, which was quite high. So you can certainly see an inflection point here. There is still room for increased adoption of digital tools, especially in decarbonization efforts, where people are convinced or respondents or professionals are convinced that it could lead to benefits if digital tools were adopted. Moving along, the third question in our survey that we talked about is on blockers to digitalization in various design and construction processes and practices. Nothing unusual here, no surprising results. Top three blockers are cost, effort, and changes needed to overcome perhaps mindset issues and other teething issues when we adopt digital tools. Shortage of skilled persons or professionals was ranked number 2, and no clear demand from clients or stakeholders on the use of digital tools was ranked the third highest blocker. It seems we are getting very good digital natives from our recent graduates who are entering our profession. So that was ranked as the lowest blocker, the availability of recent graduates not equipped with the right digital capabilities. It seems that we have made some progress on that front when bringing young graduates, recent graduates into the workforce. So again, just to give a regional context, the top three blockers by region pretty much remain the same. There is a consistency in the responses we received. And top 1, 2, and 3 by region are shown on this illustration, and you will see some sort of very similar results across regions. Now, lastly, but most importantly, the fourth question talked about the current state of data and information sharing by various functions that we've been discussing by using digital models. And we took those responses and we plotted them using what's called the RII, the Relative Importance Index. And you will notice that the maximum data sharing, collaboration, information sharing is taking place in functions such as quantity takeoff and cost estimation, health, safety, and well-being, handover and commissioning, including provisioning of digital twins. But the lowest, perhaps unsurprisingly, is in life cycle carbon emissions calculation. So that as a function and use of digital models itself is low. Therefore, perhaps the data share and information sharing for that function is quite low, and there is significant room for improvement there. We then took each of those functions, or at least the important functions, and plotted by region the use of digital models to share data and information with project team members about materials, products, systems. And you will notice that we have 4 quadrants. Obviously, top left quadrant, provide and receive, is perhaps the happy spot where we're sharing bidirectionally the information, receive only, provide only, and perhaps the worst case scenario of no data and information sharing on the bottom left quadrant. In the case of cost estimation, quantity takeoff, data is being shared. About 50% of the respondents approximately are providing and receiving information through digital models. But when we look at the same kind of question, but focus on life cycle carbon emissions, again, expectedly, the bidirectional flow of information using digital models about materials, products, and systems is quite low for the life cycle carbon emissions case. About 20% of the respondents are providing and receiving data and information and collaborating using digital models for carbon emission calculations. Health, safety, and well-being is probably quite close to cost estimation, quantification, information sharing. So we are perhaps at a spot where things can be improved, but we have reached some maturity level when talking about health, safety, and well-being and the use of digital models for sharing data and information. Lastly, we look at production and fabrication functions. Again, perhaps third ranked, but decent amount of information sharing, about 30% provide and receive, approximately 17-18% receive only, and provide about 15%. No data and information sharing is still quite high, perhaps about 35% on an average globally. So that's the 4 questions that we studied, and I've highlighted the responses. But what we probably from this research we can conclude is that data is central to the digitalization of our sector. We need to address that, consider that. Common principles and standards are crucial. We must value data and digital assets and demand data enriched processes, practices, and assets. Have processes and workflows that convert data into information, knowledge, and wisdom. Decouple data from authoring tools, and sort out contractual, technological, and cultural issues when it comes to data sharing and collaboration in our sector. So with that, I'd like to conclude the presentation. Thank you very much. You can reach me at this email. You can scan any of these QR codes. The first one is for the RICS research report on digitalization in construction. The middle one is for a recent industry white paper that we produced on digital twins, focusing on design to handover. And lastly, our quarterly global construction monitor can also be downloaded. Thank you very much. I look forward to receiving any questions and responding accordingly. Thank you.